Hi, and welcome to this episode of NGINX Community Chats. During our chat, you get a chance to hear about some things open sourcey, meet some of the people behind open source, both inside and outside of NGINX and F5, and maybe even learn something new. And today, we're kicking off Outside Insights, where we talk to people outside of NGINX around projects and technology. I'm Dave McAllister. I'm the open source technologist here at NGINX, and with me today is Tim Quinlan of Coder. Thanks for joining us today, Tim. First of all, what's Coder?
Hi, Dave. Thanks for having me. Coder is an open source cloud development environment. It's a dev platform that removes developer friction while delivering a consistent environment. It decouples all of the tooling and everything that a developer needs away from their physical hardware, moves up into a cloud instance. It uses Terraform to spin up the workspaces, so that can define what compute you use, what image you use, what tools get installed, even what cloud and what cloud hardware to run it on. So every developer gets the exact same environment, right? The upfront advantage to something like Coder is that it reduces non-coding technical work. Think like keeping your workstation patched, keeping it in compliance, configuring it, building it even. That's all taken out of the equation right up front, which leaves a lot more time for coding. The coolest thing, though, is that it's cloud and compute agnostic. You have the choice to run the control plane wherever you want. Any Linux distro or any flavor of Kubernetes will work. Then you can run your workspaces wherever. So you could run the control plane in GKE and deploy your workspaces in EC2 if you wanted. Since all the heavy workload is done in the cloud, you can access the workspace from any device. And we release clients for Linux, Mac, and Windows. So the workspace can be anything as well. So you could be sitting in a coffee shop working on NGINX or Linux kernel or some Windows app or whatever. It's a really cool way to develop software.
You know, I know that Coder has open source aspects, and obviously, having met you before, I know that you have some background in open source as well. But what got you into open source?
I was introduced to Unix when I was in college, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It just seemed so cool, right? Like stuff that seems pretty run of the mill nowadays. You know, having a decent shell, real multitasking, being able to run a job on a more powerful machine, and like X Windows with virtual desktops and stuff. At the time, that was like mind blowing to me, and I loved working on it. So my first job out of college is I was an operator, or I worked on Lucent telecom equipment, which ran on AT&T's version of Unix at the time, and I really liked that too. And then a friend of mine at work showed me Red Hat, not RHEL, Red Hat Linux, and I was just like, wow, I gotta have this. So built up a spare PC out of parts, of course, tinkered around with that. Eventually that became, my NAT gateway. And then all of a sudden there's another Linux box that's a file server for the house. And then, stuff like dual socket motherboards were becoming affordable. And the only way you could really take advantage of that, was with a real multitasking OS. So, soon enough, Linux was my daily driver, and I was really getting into it. And it was so cool. So shortly after that, I was able to start deploying Linux at work. Now, this was at a different company. This is not, replacing telecom equipment, but, things like replacing IIS and deploying Samba servers and things like that. I really saw the value in open source. And every job I've had since then has been either deploying open source for, a traditional company or working on an open source product. So that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, great backgrounds, sort of along the lines of mine getting introduced to Samba and then finding out the guy who was heading Samba as an open source project worked about 3 cubes down from me. And that's kind of got me into this mindset that says there must be something into this crowdsourcing to solve problems.
Yeah.
So that's great background, great story for this. Stepping back to Coder though, and looking at it from an open source viewpoint, the Coder repo looks like it was started. The first versions were around March of 2022 at version 0.1. Sorry,
Yeah.
0.1, and today it's at 2.19. It's got 9,000 stars, which isn't bad. I have arguments with stars, but nonetheless, it isn't bad. But that's a lot of work in 3 years here.
Yeah.
What do you think community and open source have added to your technology?
We do all of our development in the open. Even our premium features. I mean, we are a company, right? We have to make money somehow. So even our premium features are open source software. But we consider everybody, whether what you would normally think of as an open source community user, or if you're working in a big company that's a customer of ours, we consider all those people as members of the community, and they can all contribute back in one way, shape, or form, whether it's just through feedback, code contributions, you name it. And the community is really active. We have about 200 contributors on Coder/Coder, and we have a lot of different repos. Coder/Coder is for our flagship product.
It was the oldest one I could find. So
Yeah. Well, Coder goes back before that. There was a non-open source product, our first version that was launched in, I think, 2017 or something like that. But yeah, the open source version was launched in 22. But yeah, so the community is active. As I mentioned, we have almost 200 contributors on Coder/Coder. We have a Discord server that's really active. There's 3,200 users on there. And those are, what your typical community users, what you would think of, people from all around the world, big projects, small projects, big companies, little companies, you name it. And the thing is with our repos, Coder/Coder isn't even our most popular open source project. We have 125 open source projects under github.com/coder. The most popular is a project called Code Server, and it's an implementation of VS Code that runs in a browser. And it has over 70,000 stars and over 200 contributors.
Sounds really cool. So, most of our listeners are tied into NGINX open source core, even though, like you, we have a handful of open source projects that cross a lot of different boundaries. Our most popular, besides the core, are things like Kubernetes or NJS. So, what can Coder do for these people working with NGINX?
Quite a bit. I mean, obviously, Coder covers your typical open source development workflows, right? You can define a workspace that has all the source code, all the tools, all the configs, docs, test cases, everything, right? Whatever you need to do your work. And that's all built in. So when a new contributor comes onto that project, all they have to do is log into Coder, click a few buttons, and now they have an IDE presented to them that is connected to a workspace that is 100% ready to go, right? It removes all that friction from the onboarding experience, right? It's that upfront savings. But that also, there's multipliers with that, like every time at the end of every planning session of a sprint, if there's any changes, if there's any patching, whatever, it gives you benefits there. You could even extend a Coder workspace to run like stuff like systemd and Docker inside of a pod. We have another open source project called Envbox. Once again, one of our additional open source projects. And that's a wrapper for Sysbox that allows you to run, root level software inside of an unprivileged container. It's pretty cool. So with this, you could build a work-alike for your API gateway, for example, right? With Docker Compose and Docker DNS. And now, your SREs and your API admins, they could go in, make changes to their NGINX config files, test it out, try it, and then, push them up in a normal workflow. But they get the same upfront advantages that a typical software developer would get, right? Everything's there, everything they need, it's ready to go.
Yeah, and as a side comment to the viewers here, an API gateway is not equal to gateway API, because we've had several talks that have talked about the gateway API and the NGINX gateway fabric. So don't get them confused. I don't know who thought of the names, but they really needed to rethink themselves.
Yeah.
So with this, it sounds like this is really a great way to, in a sense, enable the onboarding and establishing people. But I'm going to shift gears on you hard left here on this, because we ask all our guests this question: what is your favorite non-work open source project?
So I have two, and I could not decide between the two because I like them both so much. They are ZFS and Ollama. ZFS is awesome. Like, remember how I described how blown away I was by Unix, right? When back in college, that's the first time I saw ZFS and really started to learn about it. It was the same thing. And if you're a storage nerd, you know this, but if you're not, It's awesome. You can do everything from, snapshotting your home directory up to building a full SAN if you wanted with ZFS. It's incredible. And some operating systems like FreeBSD, for example, they actually have ZFS integration built into their bootloader, right? So before you do a system upgrade, you snapshot your entire system and you run the upgrade. If it goes south, you just reboot into the old, pre-upgrade state, and all the changes that were made are discarded. It's utterly incredible, and I don't make that statement lightly. It blows me away every time I use it. It's great. And then for Olama, like it or not, AI is going to play a bigger and bigger role in your life. Whether that's customer service or helping you code or helping you, dig through docs, whatever it is, it's going to be playing a bigger role. So to have something like Olama where folks can tinker and learn about LLMs, try different LLMs out, or even just to be able to use Gen AI within the boundaries of your own network, right? That's a game changer to me. And it's amazing how quick some of those models will run, even on, modest hardware. I use it on my laptop all the time. My kids, who are also Linux users, they have some gaming machines down in the basement with admittedly old Radeon cards on them, and Olama runs like a champ on those. So it's really cool. I would encourage anybody to check those two things out.
You've got a lot of background in open source, and one of the things that we find, because we talk to a lot of open source people, it's in my job title actually, is that people are confused about how to start contributing. So would you recommend, or what would you recommend for someone who wanted to get started contributing, be it Coder or any other project?
So this is going to sound really cliche, but scratch an itch, right? You hear a lot of open source projects were started back in the day because a developer needed something and it didn't exist, right? So they scratched their own itch. Right now, starting a new project to get involved with open source is probably not the way I would go about doing it. However, you can still scratch your own itch, right? Find a piece of open source software that does the thing that you need to do. And then once you incorporate that into your workflow, and now whether that's work or just, computing as a hobby, however you integrate it into your flow, check out the project and see where they need help, right? If you can code, awesome, great. They're always, open source projects are always going to like people sending them patches, but you don't have to be a programmer to contribute to open source software. Most projects need help with peer support and documentation. Internationalization is huge. If you speak multiple languages, almost any open source project would welcome you to help translate their docs or translate their UI, whatever it is. Even, some of the bigger ones with fancy websites, they need web designers and graphics people. I know the Fedora project is always looking for folks on the creative side. And most importantly, if you're using their software, and this is a contribution that anybody could do. If you're using the software and you find a problem with it, file a bug report. Period. Right. It documents it for everybody so that the other users realize, well, hey, I'm not alone. Somebody else is seeing this problem, but then it'll get fixed. And then, nobody will run into that problem in the future. So, I mean, anybody, if you can use the software, you can contribute back in one way, shape, or form.
Yeah, your documentation thing is really near and dear to our hearts as well. We've just recently open sourced all NGINX documentation, and it has, in the last month, already become one of the most actively contributed to projects in the history of NGINX.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
So documentation is something, even if you just go through and submit typo fixes, it's important. So strongly recommend just get involved, get started almost any way you want to.
Yeah.
So it's been great listening about Coder, but how do our listeners and viewers find out more about Coder?
Well, there's lots of ways. Our GitHub, of course, right? GitHub.com/Coder. We have 125 public repos there that you can get involved in any of them. We have about 95,000 aggregate stars across all those repos, but we are shooting for 100,000. So we do appreciate stars, even whether you agree with them or not, Dave. I don't know. So check out what we have. Like I said, everything we have out there it's tenuously related to cloud development environments, but there are some things that if you had your own CD that you were building, you could use, or even just in day-to-day stuff. And our website as well. That houses all of our product info and all of our docs for both community and premium. And we have a really active blog and white paper section too. And we're always hosting webinars about Coder and CDEs in general. So you can keep track of all that stuff on coder.com. But we're also starting up more meetups and more user groups. And we announce that stuff on Discord and LinkedIn and Meetup. So if you look for us on any of those platforms, you'll be able to find out where we are, what's new, and maybe come out and meet us.
Thanks, Tim, for joining us today. And this Coder stuff sounds really, really cool. I knew this was coming, so I did a little bit of looking at this, and it's pretty impressive what y'all have done from the automation and delivery aspects in particular. And I love the fact that it's based on open source in all categories for that. And thanks to you for joining us today to learn about Coder with our kickoff episode of Outside Insights. If you have your own thoughts, questions, or comments, feel free to leave them for us here. And as always, may the open source be with you.